I got people in my life who are just going through it right now. People who are close to me, people who are friends of mine, who are just suffering, just dealing with stuff that is hurtful and painful and disheartening. And I can sing a few bars of that tune. And the state of the world is such that it's not very difficult to be discouraged, to feel a little bit low and to feel a little bit down. And so what I wanted to do this week was something for those people. I wanted to offer some balm. I wanted to offer some encouragement, some support in this episode. And the problem is, I just can't think of what to say. I've been racking my brains trying to come up with something that doesn't seem trite and trivial. And I haven't been able to do it. But what's interesting is that I've been looking around for other people's wisdom. And in my travels, I've been led, once again, back to the Bible. In this case, with help from a quintessential 60s pop rock song, I've been led to the Book of Eccelsiastes, and I'll be straight up honest with you. I've come away from my exploration about as disappointed as I was with my exploration of the Book of Job. But I still think maybe, just maybe, there's something in it, and I shall attempt to wax semi-eloquent about it this week. See if you're familiar with this. To everything, turn, turn, turn. There is a season, turn, turn, turn. And a time to every purpose under heaven. A time to be born, a time to die, a time to plant, a time to reap, a time to kill, a time to heal, a time to laugh, a time to weep. To everything, turn, turn, turn. There is a season, turn, turn, turn. And a time to every purpose under heaven. You're familiar with that? You are familiar with that? That is a tune called Turn, 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 parenthesis, To Everything There Is a Season, written by the late, great Pete Seeger. Now, the late, great Pete Seeger is himself probably a pretty damn good podcast episode. Pete Seeger was he still is, but he's deceased now, a legendary American songwriter in the folk tradition. And he came to pretty substantial prominence in the late 1940s, early 1950s with a folk act called the Weavers. And they put out a bunch of music and they sold a lot of records, and the Weavers were a thing. They were named, quite literally, after weavers. The band The Weavers was named in honor of a group of textile workers in the region once known as Silesia, which is modern day, mostly Silesia would be in modern day Poland, parts of Czech Republic, parts of Germany. And if you go back to the 1840s, these textile workers, these weavers, were being thoroughly exploited and mistreated by the people who supplied their fabric to weave, and in particular by the factory owners for whom they were weaving. And there came a point in 1844 when a group of these weavers decided they'd had just about enough and launched a protest against the factory owners. And long story short, the protest gained a little bit of momentum, and as happened back in those days, was quickly trodden upon by the local authorities, in this case, Prussian troops. And about 11 weavers were killed as the Prussians were stamping out this protest against poor treatment, poor wages. It was one of the first examples of the workers trying to rise up against those who control the means of production. Some of you who are history people will recognize some of that language and get a sense of where this is going. Fast forward just about 100 years to the Greenwich Village area in New York, and you got Pete Seeger and his pals in the Weavers doing a pretty good business, writing folk songs, releasing records, and selling a lot of them. Right? The Weavers were a thing, but they ran into a problem because it's the late 1940s, early 1950s, and World War II is over, and the Cold War has begun. And America, like the rest of the free world, is wrapped in the grip of the Red Scare. The Red Menace. And everybody's looking over their shoulders hysterically for the Reds lurking in the corners and trying to poison their children, trying to infiltrate. And you're going to be in a band called the Weavers, inspired by these workers who tried to seize control of the means of production, and you're going to go around singing protesty kind of folk songs in Greenwich. Sounds a bit commie. And if you're the American government, you're going after commies. You're going after anybody who might be a commie. You're going after anybody who you think might know somebody who might be a commie. You're going after people, if it's convenient, who you just don't like, that you can brand as a commie and get blacklisted, all right? And under the leadership, quote unquote, of people like Senator Joseph McCarthy, the American government is cracking down hard on anyone it perceives, conveniently or otherwise, might be a commie. And so the Weavers get blacklisted. Now, in the American government's defense, in McCarthy's defense, Pete Seeger was pretty low-hanging fruit. Okay, now he came up his formative musical years singing with a group called the Almanac Singers. And the Almanac Singers were connected to an organization initially known as the American Peace Mobilization. And these cats in the early 40s were very much against the United States entering World War II. Until, that is, in 1941, Hitler invaded the Soviet Union. Then all of a sudden, the Almanac Singers and the people from the American Peace Mobilization were feeling a little less peaceful, and they changed their name to the American People's Mobilization. Now, if you've paid any attention to history, anytime a group starts putting the word people in its title, commie, that's the immediate association. But that's okay in wartime, all right? We can do that in wartime because we have bigger fish to fry, and the commies are actually American allies in World War II against the Nazis. I hope I don't get blacklisted for saying Nazis because podcasters get in trouble now for even using that word. I'm just talking history here, folks, okay? Let's not write to Congress. So Pete Seeger's got this association with the American People's Mobilization, even though he served in World War II, and he was actually a card-carrying member of the Communist Party during the 40s. So McCarthy, etc., didn't have to look too far to find some pretty compelling dirt on Mr. Pete Seeger. And so he and the Weavers get blacklisted, which means you kind of got to go underground a little bit. Now, a lot of people had their lives destroyed by this Red Scare, by McCarthyism, by blacklisting. People lost their jobs, they lost their businesses, they lost their livelihoods, they lost their reputations, and a lot of the time on bogus charges, trumped up charges. Pete Seeger goes underground a little bit, keeps writing, whatever. Eventually, as tends to happen, it blew over a little bit, all right? McCarthyism, the Red Scare, it backed off a little bit. Pete Seeger resurfaces. as a solo act, writing his songs, singing his songs, playing his songs. And one of the songs that he wrote was called Turn, 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 To Everything There Is a Season. That song was first recorded and released by a folk band called the Limelighters. That was released in 1962. And then a few months later, Pete Seeger's own version of the song was released. So you got a couple versions of Turn, 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 To Everything There Is a Season floating around. And it falls into the lap of one Judy Collins. Pop legend Judy Collins. She wants to do a version of it, and so she calls up this cat called Jim McGuinn. Jim McGuinn has been a backing musician for the Limelighters, so he knows the song Turn, Turn, Turn. Judy Collins pulls in Jim McGuinn to help her arrange her version of that song, which, when you hear it, will feel a lot more familiar to you than what the Limelighters released or what even Pete Seeger released. The reason is Mr. Jim McGuinn. Now, funny thing about Jim McGuinn, this is 1963. Judy Collins releases her version of the song. But Jim McGuinn is about to come to pretty spectacular prominence as a member of a band he's getting off the ground called, can anyone guess it? Farmer John of Vinyl Relics? You're probably screaming it at the top of your lungs. The Byrds! Yes, Jim McGuinn of the Byrds. And they decide they want to do their own version of Turn, 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 To Everything There Is a Season. But it's not going to be like the others, all right? Jim McGuinn is a rock and roll guy. He's a 60s rock and roll guy. And his interpretation of that song is going to be a full rock band interpretation. And so they go into the studio and they cut this thing, and it becomes the version of Turn, Turn, Turn that we all know. A #1 Billboard charting single. One of the, as I said, quintessential songs of the 1960s. It certainly is for me. Anytime I think of anything to do with the 60s, Vietnam War, counterculture, any of the civil rights protests, whatever, anything that I think of that has to do with the 60s, stuff we've talked about on this podcast, Turn, Turn, Turn is the song. Turn, Turn, Turn is the song. And that's why it appears in so many 60s flavored productions. For example, Forrest Gump, which is one of my favorite movies of all time. That scene after in D.C., Forrest has had a dust up with the Black Panthers and Jenny's abusive boyfriend, and they're parting ways, and Jenny's getting back on the bus to leave the protest. They play Turn, Turn, Turn. It is the quintessential 1960s political song. And you're saying to yourself, that's all well and good. What's it got to do with the Book of Eccelsiastes? Well, that's a funny thing. Because if you recall those lyrics that I read out at the beginning, they are almost verbatim taken from the Book of Eccelsiastes. Pete Seeger did not write the lyrics to Turn, 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 except for the Turn, Turn, Turn part and the couplet at the end, A time for peace, I swear it's not too late. That's all. That's all that he wrote for that. Everything else was, depending on which tradition you follow, written by King Solomon 3,000 years ago in the Book of Eccelsiastes. And I don't know exactly why I had that on my mind as I was contemplating trying to do something this week that would be helpful for people who are suffering. I think it's probably the lyric that comes out of that song, which is, to everything there is a season and a time to every purpose under heaven. I think sometimes about how stuff happens. And sometimes there's a season of distress and sometimes there's a season of joy. And the game is to try and keep your stuff together while you're experiencing those seasons. But it pulled me into this exploration of the Book of Eccelsiastes, which is objectively almost as hilarious as the Book of Job was. You go back a few episodes and you can hear what we discovered about the Book of Job, which is purported to be this great treatise on human suffering, which turned out to be not all that much help at all. And so it is with Ecclesiastes, but some of it in a very dark way is kind of hilarious. Now, this is in the Old Testament, and legend says it was written by the wise old King Solomon. Chances are it probably wasn't, but some people have at least attributed it to King Solomon. And it sounds to me like King Solomon was having a bloody rough time, the dark season, about the time he was writing this stuff. I'm not going to read the whole book to you, although it is not long. It's like 11 chapters or something. Short chapters. You can read it very quickly or you can listen to it. There are, again, audio productions of this. But let's just look at the opening of the Book of Ecclesiastes. The wisdom of Solomon, purportedly. When the son of David was king in Jerusalem, he was known to be very wise. And he said, get this, he said, nothing makes sense. Everything is nonsense. I've seen it all. Nothing makes sense. What is there to show for all of our hard work here on this earth? People come, people go, but still the world never changes. And the sun comes up, the sun goes down, it hurries right back to where it started from. The wind blows south, the wind blows north, round and round it blows, over and over again. All rivers empty into the sea, but it never spills over. One by one, the rivers return to their source. All of life is far more boring than words could ever say. Our eyes and our ears are never satisfied with what we see and hear. Everything that happens has happened before. Nothing is new. Nothing under the sun. Someone might say, here's something new, but it happened before. Long before we were born. No one who lived in the past is remembered anymore, and everyone yet to be born will be forgotten too. I said these things when I lived in Jerusalem as king of Israel. With all my wisdom, I tried to understand everything that happens here on earth. And God has made this so hard for us humans to do. I have seen it all, and everything is just as senseless as chasing the wind. This dude is not feeling it, okay? This is the opening. That's the opening 14 verses of the Book of Ecclesiastes. This dude sitting down saying, I tried to reason with the things that happen in this world, and none of it makes friggin' sense, and I don't really see the point. If you can take anything, by the way, I'm reading from the contemporary English version, all right, so this is a relatively modern vernacular, just because it makes life easier to sort out. But I find it funny. We're supposed to have so much inspiration from the biblical texts, you know. And here's the Book of Job, which is just this horrendous lamentation. And here's Ecclesiastes, with the writer being like, I don't get it, man. And I draw a certain amount of comfort from knowing that even the Bible writers didn't have this figured out. You know, if you can take a silver lining from all of this, it's that, well, if you're lost, it would appear you're not the only one. And they got into the Bible, the best-selling book of all time, I think at least until Harry Potter came along. And there's a lot in this book that I like this book way better than Job, by the way. This one it's just fun to watch this dude riff. I assume it was a dude. I could be wrong. I'm going to read to you a hefty chunk of chapter 2. I said to myself, have fun and enjoy yourself. But this didn't make sense. Laughing and having fun is crazy. What good does it do? I wanted to find out what was best for us during the short time we have on this earth. So I decided to make myself happy with wine and find out what it means to be foolish without really being foolish myself. And I did some great things. I built houses and planted vineyards. I had flower gardens and orchards full of fruit trees. And I had pools where I could get water for the trees. I owned slaves, and their sons and daughters became my slaves. Easy, man. Crikey. I had more sheep and goats than anyone who had ever lived in Jerusalem. Foreign rulers brought me silver, gold, precious treasures. Men and women sang for me, and I had many wives who gave me great pleasure. Sounds to me like this dude was living it up. I was the most famous person who had ever lived in Jerusalem, and I was very wise. I got whatever I wanted and did whatever made me happy, but most of all, I enjoyed my work. Then I thought about everything I had done, including the hard work, and it was simply chasing the wind. Nothing on earth is worth the trouble. Dude, nothing on earth is worth the trouble. I'm quoting the Bible. Nothing on earth is worth the trouble. I asked myself, what can the next king do that I haven't done? Then I decided to compare wisdom with foolishness and stupidity, and I discovered that wisdom is better than foolishness, just as light is better than darkness. Wisdom is like having two good eyes. Foolishness leaves you in the dark, but wise or foolish, we all end up the same. Finally, I said to myself, being wise got me nowhere. The same thing will happen to me that happens to fools. Nothing makes sense. Wise or foolish, we all die and are soon forgotten. This made me hate life. Everything we do is painful. It's just as senseless as chasing the wind. Do you feel that? Suddenly I realized that others would someday get everything I had worked for so hard. Then I started hating it all. Who knows if those people will be sensible or stupid? Either way, they will own everything I have earned by hard work and wisdom. Doesn't make sense. Thought about all my hard work and I felt depressed. When we use our wisdom, knowledge, and skill to get what we own, why do we have to leave it to someone who didn't work for it? This is senseless and wrong. What do we really gain from all of our hard work? Our bodies ache during the day and work is torture. Then at night, our thoughts are troubled. It just doesn't make sense. What was going on? What was going on with this guy? Sounds like he's got all the wives anybody could ever want. I'm not pro-slavery, but it sounds like he's got a lot of money. He's a king for crying out loud, but boy, is he lamenting. Our bodies ache during the day and work is torture. Then at night, our thoughts are troubled. It just doesn't make sense. But then he hits on something, which is not one of his wives. He says the best thing we can do is to enjoy eating, drinking, and working. I believe these are God's gifts to us. And no one enjoys eating and living more than I do. This is the Bible. I'm not making this up. Then we get to chapter 3, and this is where the tie begins. Chapter 3, everything on earth has its own time and its own season. Turn, turn, turn. There is a time for birth and death, planting and reaping, for killing and healing, destroying and building, for crying and laughing, weeping and dancing, for throwing stones and gathering stones, embracing and parting. There is a time for finding and losing, keeping and giving, for tearing and sowing, listening and speaking. There is also a time for love and hate, for war and peace. And Pete Seeger thinks it's not too late. That's the lyrics. I'm not reading from the same translation as Pete Seeger borrowed from. Those are the lyrics to Turn, Turn, Turn. And they came straight out of the Book of Eccelsiastes. And I had no friggin' idea. I had no idea. But it's a really compelling thing. This is a famous song that A, most people don't even know wasn't written by the Byrds. And B, the lyrics themselves come straight out of the Bible. And then this book just becomes more and more fascinating because this dude is fed the F up. This cat, for all of his wealth and women, has had it, man. And I just don't know. I'm curious to know, but I wonder how many of us feel the same way. I mean, all of my wives, God love them, they get to be a hassle, you know? Do we feel this, though? Do we feel some of the despondency do we feel the dissatisfaction? Do we feel in ourselves the senselessness and pointlessness of so much of the human condition? I feel this. I feel this at times, this just general discouragement. I feel this disheartening. I feel a lot of the time, what is the friggin' point? And it's not unusual. I'm not going to sing the song. It's not even surprising that a person would feel that way these days, because it feels like so much is beyond our control, and it feels like so much is sliding off a cliff, and it feels like so much is expensive, and we are, most of us, getting older, and we're beginning to wonder, what have we been doing anyways? And what prospect do we have? Now, I don't live in that kind of bleak place all the time, but certainly over the past year plus, those thoughts have entered my mind, and I know from talking to other people that it has entered yours too. And maybe, like some of my friends who I referenced in the opening, you're struggling right now too. The same way that whoever wrote Ecclesiastes may have been looking around himself and thinking, what have I worked for? What is the point of all of this? What is the big cosmic meaning of it all? And I'm really impressed and delighted to find that there are Bible writers who struggled with this stuff too. Jump ahead to chapter 7. More advice, or at least the writer tried to come to terms with it all. Verse 14, when times are good, you should be cheerful. When times are bad, think about what it means. God makes them both to keep us from knowing what will happen next. The great mystery. Do you have faith to believe in the great mystery? Go back to last week's episode. Which wolf are you feeding? The dark wolf or the light wolf? When times are good, you should be cheerful. Yeah, man. Indulge those good times. How do we know times are good unless we also have bad times? Even Job knew that. But when things are good, be grateful. Be grateful for the goodness. Even when things are bad, if there's good stuff in them, even something as simple as a nice cup of coffee, hold on to whatever it is that's good and be cheerful. When times are bad, think about what it means. And that's the hard one. That's the really hard one, because when times are bad, a lot of us humans who are not perhaps as advanced as some of the writers we read, we want to blame. Don't we want to blame? When times are bad, don't we want to make it somebody's fault? When times are bad, don't we want to lash out? Don't we want to let our anger rule us? Don't we want to let our hurt and our sadness rule us? That's very natural. That's very human. That can be very satisfying up to a point. It can also create more problems than it solves, depending on how you release your anger. But there's a little gem here. When times are bad, think about what it means. This encourages, instead of emotional reaction, intuitive inquiry. Doesn't mean you don't feel things. I always encourage people to feel what you feel and indulge that, but think about what it means. And that can mean think about what it means cosmically if you like, or think about what it means to your personal life. Like, this thing has happened to you, or somebody has wounded you, or somebody has disrespected you, or somebody has hurt you, and you can begin to inquire into, why does that hurt me? All right, why do I react the way I react to this? What does it mean about my own values, about my own principles, maybe about my own ego? That's a big one for me. When I react in an emotional way to something, what does it mean about me? That doesn't mean that your emotional reaction is not justified, but it opens up this wonderful question about what values of mine are being violated here. Is it a sense of justice? Is it wanting to be respected and having spent my whole life feeling disrespected and powerless? What's it poking at? What does it mean when times are bad? Or in the case that I'm going through, or when, even a better example is a few years ago when I had the anxiety breakdown, that's a bad time. That's the worst time. What does it mean? Well, for me at that time, it meant a call to surrender. All right. It was not a punishment. It was just a circumstance. The question is, how do you react to the circumstance? What do you do with it? In my case, it was a call to return to a spiritual view of the world. In my case, it was a call to surrender to whatever it is that makes all of this happen and to cultivate a faith that things are going to be okay. So that was a bad time when I could have collapsed and very nearly did. And I could have turned that into a substance problem. I could have turned that into any manner of denial or deflection. I chose at the time to inquire a little deeper. What does it mean? What is this circumstance presenting for me to investigate and inquire into? And how can I use this to improve myself or my life in some way? And so it's been for the last year when I've had to take responsibility for what is mine to take responsibility for in a marriage breakup and going through this uncertainty about the future. Well, what does it mean? What is it asking you to do? In what way is it asking you to change or perceive differently? That could be a very empowering thing. A lot of times we get angry and lash out because we feel powerless, but there is an enormous amount of power in your ability to contemplate a circumstance, understand it, adjust to it, and improve yourself through it. Super duper powerful. And that's a really potent little piece of wisdom from this very odd book of the Bible. Same chapter 7, verses 15 to 18. I have seen everything during this senseless life of mine. I have seen good citizens die for doing the right thing, while criminals live and prosper. So don't destroy yourself by being too good or acting too smart. I think that's a sarcastic line. Don't trouble yourself being too good. Don't die before your time by being too evil or acting like a fool. Keep to the middle of the road. You can do this if you truly respect God. And that's probably my favorite line in the whole damn book. Why? Because it echoes the Tao. The Tao is all about lose your attachments, keep to the center, keep to your foundation. Don't go swinging wildly off in directions. Keep to the center. Don't get too high. Don't get too low. And those of us who are out there right now in low places, this is an encouragement to pull back to the center. And you can do that if you truly respect God. Let's dispense the word God. If you truly respect consciousness, if you truly respect faith in life, faith in the universe, faith in yourself, you can keep to the center in bad situations. You can keep to the center in bad times. And I love that this mirrors the Tao. The Tao is about keeping level, keeping centered, not attaching to a disrespect, not attaching to a desire you have, not attaching to a person, not attaching to a job, not even attaching to a circumstance, because people do that too. So I lost this gig and I'm going to attach to the identity of somebody who lost that gig because people will have sympathy for me. Or I can use that to overlook that my playing wasn't up to snuff or I did something wrong. All theoretical, of course, but you can attach to the identity of a wounded person. This is saying, and the Tao is saying, detach, keep to the center, keep to where it is quiet, keep to where it is stable. Do not let your emotions rule you. Feel them, but do not let them rule you because they will lead you into a dangerous place, and you will probably do or say something you regret and make things much, much worse. Feel your feelings. Don't attach to the feelings. Keep to the center. I love that line. I'm going to read you just one more little passage from the Book of Eccelsiastes. It's chapter 9, so we're getting near the end. And this is a really fun passage. This book is hilarious and so weird. Ecclesiastes chapter 9, verse 7. So be happy and enjoy eating and drinking. We can all do that, right? God decided long ago that this is what you should do. Dress up, comb your hair, look your best. Again, this is a modern English translation. Life is short, and you love your wife, so enjoy being with her. This is what you're supposed to do as you struggle through life on this earth. Work hard at whatever you do. You will soon go to the world of the dead, where no one works or thinks or reasons or even knows anything. It also echoes the Tao. One of my favorite lines in the Tao Te Ching. Do your work, then step back. The only path to serenity. Do your work, then step back. The only path to serenity. Do your work, then step back. Release the outcome. I remind myself of that almost every time I sit down to do this podcast. Do your work. In my case, produce this thing. Make it the best I can. Try to make it edifying. Then step back, which is let go of the results. Let go of whether it gets heard, whether there's downloads, whether the podcast turns into anything. This is one of the hardest things a human can do, by the way, especially one as egoic and self-conscious as me. Do your work, then step back. The only path to serenity. Again, this is a releasing of an attachment. Serenity comes when you let go of the results. Serenity comes when you just do your work. And I don't mean that job you hate. I mean when you do your work. Underline the word your. When you do your work, the work that is yours to do. And that is a unique thing for every one of us. So you may have a day job, but your work is the painting you do, or the poetry you write, or the music you play, or the volunteering you do, or the yard work you do for your family. That is actually your work, the work you are here on earth to do. And the only path to serenity is doing that work that is yours to do. And if you find yourself wandering around disgruntled and upset and feeling cynical and feeling angry at the world and casting blame, take a damn close look at whether you're doing your work, your dharma, that thing or those things for which you were put here on this earth. And that doesn't mean you make a living from that, but it is your soul's expression. It is what you're here for. And if you're not doing it, that will create an emptiness in you. And that emptiness will be fertile ground for cynicism and discouragement and disgruntlement and bitterness and anger and sadness and all of those things. I firmly believe this. When you are engaged in your work, the work that is yours to do, those things go away. And a sense of fulfillment and mission and purpose follows in that void and comes through that void. And I think the writer is trying to say something similar here. He's also saying, don't take it so damn seriously all the time. Be happy and enjoy eating and drinking. Dress up, comb your hair, and look your best. Trip the Light's fantastic, man. Life is meant to be living. We're here for a good time, not a long time. And so many of us get wrapped up in the ego side of that. No, I gotta be someone. I gotta be someone as opposed to no one, right? Ram Dass made it his whole mission to become no one, which is to have no ego identity whatsoever. What a gentle way to go through life. You're not attached to anything because you're no one. You don't get wrapped up in your isness, in this false identity that you've ascribed to yourself, this otherness that you feel, this separation from other people. And this guy is saying the purpose of life is to simply experience. Other faith traditions say the same damn thing. We are extensions of the divine, of divine consciousness, experiencing reality through us. And I think this writer of Ecclesiastes is saying the same thing. The purpose of life is merely to go and live life and to be happy. And sometimes that means bad stuff is going to happen. And sometimes that's going to mean you're going to be hurt. And sometimes that's going to mean you're going to feel disillusioned and dispirited and disheartened. And that is all part of this wondrous experience that we call being a human on earth. It's all part of the experience. It's all part of the good stuff, even though it presents as bad stuff. And this writer is saying, I don't really get the mystery, but I think what we're just supposed to do is laugh as much as we can. Spend time with the people we love. Don't get too wrapped up in our status. And when stuff goes haywire, keep to the center. Stay to the middle of the road. And so I guess that's my encouragement to all of my listeners and friends out there who are struggling right now, as I am struggling right now. The temptation to drift out of the center and into judgment, fear, and anxiety, and anger, and disheartenment, discouragement. The temptation is powerful to do that, but it's not helpful. It doesn't take you anywhere, even if it's justified. Now, your feelings are what they are. Your feelings are not wrong. They're never wrong. But you have to examine why you feel them. And what is it that's being triggered in you that's creating those feelings? And that is such a useful thing to inquire into, as difficult as that can be. And go enjoy what there is to be enjoyed. I know that sounds trite. Again, it always, for me, comes back to a cancer diagnosis. Hard to enjoy, but then there are lots of people who get diagnosed with something like that who develop a new and raw and visceral appreciation for something so simple as going out for drinks with their friends. This is stuff that we have taken for granted before. All of a sudden, there's a shorter timeline on that possibly, and it becomes more vital. It becomes more important. And everybody always says, when stuff goes down, it's your health that you appreciate. It's your friends that you appreciate. It's your family. It's the simple little things. And everything else in a crisis becomes very, 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 very much less important. And I think that's what the writer of Ecclesiastes is saying. Look, dude, go drink. Go dancing with your friends. Put your best dress on, kid. Get out there and drink the marrow. Get out there and suck the marrow of life. Dead Poet Society. Stop sitting around being offended. Stop sitting around being hurt. Pick yourself up. Now, there is a season for that. Turn. But eventually, pick yourself up. Put yourself into the world and go do those things that you damn well enjoy. And if you're doing things that you don't enjoy, ask yourself why. Ask yourself why. Because as the writer of Ecclesiastes points out repeatedly, we're all worm food, kids. It ends the same way for all of us, whether we were righteous or not, whether we made six figures or not, whether we had a hit record or not. It ends the same way for all of us. And so, if you're struggling right now, remember your divinity. Remember that you are a slice of the divine experiencing life on earth. Feel your feelings. I am not discounting or discrediting the things that hurt you or the things that hurt me. It sucks. And the only way to push through that is to go through that. You can't skate your way around it. You can't drink yourself past it. It only makes things worse. Feel what you feel, right? Sit with what you feel, but take the opportunity to inquire into why you feel those things and what it means and what you might be able to change in your perception or your values about that. And then, damn it, put your tap shoes on and go dancing. I think that's the message of Ecclesiastes. I think that's all I have. I think that's all I have to say this week, and it better be, because it's at this moment 5 minutes to 8, and this sucker's got to be published at midnight 02. Thank you ever so much for listening. If you are struggling, I really hope you can find your way through it, as I find my way through it, as we all find our way through it. Man, there is a season of suffering. But good things happen when you put yourself out there, okay? So go listen to the birds. Those of you who are real musophiles, go listen to the wide variety of different versions of that song, because they are all interpreted very, very differently. Very, very interesting to go and listen to, just as an exercise in how you can interpret a song. The Birds have the best version. It's one of my favorite songs, actually, and it is the 60s to me, and maybe I'll go watch Forrest Gump. Thank you ever so much for listening. I dearly appreciate your support. I hope you are well, and I'll be back with something next week.